This is the Vietnam War Research Paper Conference. The topic is, the Vietnam War is often referred to as Johnson's War, since it was on LBJ's watch that the major escalation of U.S. involvement took place. But some scholars argue it could just as easily be called Kennedy's War or even Eisenhower's War, because of what these scholars see as the crucial decisions made between the early 1950s and early 1960s. What is your view? In other words, most people blame President Lyndon B. Johnson for the Vietnam conflict. However, when you start to do research, you're going to find that other presidents like Kennedy and like Eisenhower also made some crucial decisions that increased America's involvement or escalation of the war. So basically what you're trying to do with this particular topic is you're trying to decide who or which president should be held responsible for the conflict. And there's basically two ways that you can argue. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the research guide, of course, found on the class webpage. So, option A, you're going to argue it's all three presidents' fault, that they share responsibility. If you choose this option, you'll have one paragraph on Eisenhower, one paragraph on John F. Kennedy, and one paragraph on Lyndon B. Johnson. The option B, the alternative, is that you're going to argue it was only LBJ's fault. So, in this instance, you're going to argue in paragraph 1, or discuss in paragraph 1, LBJ's political decisions related to Vietnam, his economic decisions, and then finally in the third paragraph, his military decisions. Again, all related to the Vietnam conflict. It does not matter to me which way you argue. Oftentimes students choose which way they argue simply based on what they want to research or what interests them. For example, if you are really interested in Lyndon B. Johnson and want very specific and focused research, then option B would be the one you would want to choose. If you'd like to learn a little bit about all three presidents and you don't necessarily want to just focus on Johnson, then option A is what you're going to choose. One is not easier than the other. It really is just based on your level of interest. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about the research that you're going to do and how you're going to do it. I really strongly recommend that you do use chapter 22 of your textbook and that you also use at least one of the lectures that I've posted on the class webpage. These are actually really good starting places, and they are 100% the best place to look for your introduction. You do have to have research for your introduction. You won't have any quotes. It'll all be summary writing, but you're still going to have to cite all the facts that you've paraphrased. And these are the different topics that you're going to have to include in your introduction. So, chapter 22 of your textbook covers the Vietnam War and then lectures. Now, there's one lecture that I highly recommend that you use to help you with your introduction, and that is on the class webpage. So if you go to the class webpage and you go down to the U.S. History Lectures section and click on that, you will find a lecture towards the end, second semester right here, the Vietnam conflict. So number 1, background on the Vietnam conflict. If you click on that lecture, you're going to find all the vital information that you need to help you write your introduction, as well as to understand some of the basics of the Vietnam War. In terms of citing this lecture, there are directions on how to cite the lecture on the class webpage. So, again, we're on the class webpage. We're going to go to Mrs. Hamilton's history classes, the main page again, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to scroll down to the U.S. History Research Paper. We click on that, and we scroll down, and it says Works Cited MLA. And then right here, it says MLA Formula for Books and Lectures. If you click on MLA 8 Formula for Books and Lectures, a Word document will pop up. You're going to open up that Word document. This is the same thing that we used for the 1920s magazine, only now we're looking at a lecture. So right here, this is the source information in the right MLA format that goes into your source list that you are keeping. In terms of what goes on your note card, you should have Hamilton in parentheses with the title of the lecture. Okay, so I would recommend, again, starting with your textbook and starting with lectures to help you in the process of beginning this paper. Please note, though, either the textbook or the lectures can be counted as one of your 5 sources. But again, they're great for background for both your introduction, and they may also help you with your analysis. There are also 2 books in the library. They're wonderful books. You could actually just basically use these books to write the paper, except for that I require 5 sources. Both of these books can also be found in the Contra Costa County Library System. The first is called America's Longest War, written by George C. Herring. The second is simply called Vietnam, and it's written by Stanley Carnow. These aren't the only books in the library covering the Vietnam War that would help you. There's a lot more. I'll be showing you where to find the Vietnam War books at some point in class over the next couple of days. Okay, so giving you some ideas with sources, let's talk about what you're actually going to be looking at when you're doing your research. So we're going down to this body paragraph section. First, it says make sure you know what the 3 terms mean: political, economic, and military. You've got to know those terms because no matter which organization you're choosing, that it's all 3 paragraph presidents or just LBJ's fault, you are going to be talking about political, economic, and military decisions for the presidents. So looking up those words, making sure you understand them is vitally important. Okay, next, you're going to research each president's policy regarding Vietnam. So this, of course, is for option A primarily, although a lot of students start with option A and then they decide whether they're going to continue with A or they're going to switch to B. So that's up to you. So best way to research each president's policy regarding Vietnam is to simply take one of those Vietnam overview books, look in the back in the index, and look up the name of the president. So when you're looking up Eisenhower in the back, you'll see all the pages in that book where Eisenhower was involved in some decision related to the Vietnam War. You'll simply read those pages, not the whole book, just those pages where Eisenhower's name is, and you're going to simply create note cards. Your goal is to try and find one political decision related to Vietnam, one economic decision related to Vietnam, and one military decision related to Vietnam. Now, please note, sometimes in the books they won't say Eisenhower made this decision. However, they'll use a year instead. They'll say in 1954, the United States did this. Okay? That would still fall under Eisenhower. That's why I put these dates here, was to make sure that you had a little bit of flexibility in understanding which president is responsible for which decision. When we're talking about economic decisions, please make sure it is economic decisions specifically related to Vietnam. In other words, how much money did that president spend in Vietnam? You need numbers for these economic decisions. Okay, so you'll take note cards on Eisenhower, you'll look up Kennedy's name in the back of the book, and then Johnson's name in the back of these books and take notes. Again, most students start with option A and then decide if they want to continue in that course or not. That's step 3 right here. Decide who you think is responsible based on the research that you've done. And I would say after you've done about 15 note cards or so, I would say make a decision if you're going to continue with option A or move into option B and just focus on Lyndon B. Johnson. Next, it says find political, economic, and military decisions for each and make sure all are directly related to Vietnam. Sometimes I have students just list random policies that these presidents had, not related to Vietnam at all. That's not going to work for you. So make sure they are all directly related to the Vietnam conflict. Now, besides using books, the other thing, of course, that you can do is you can do searches on the databases. My recommendation is you search for the Vietnam conflict, and then on those databases, they actually have a search within results. And you could click on that search within results and search for the president's names. I also have at the bottom right here some keywords or terms to help you do some research. So these are the types of things that you could look up in the back of a book in the index or that you could search for in a database. Just simply use these as your search terms. Okay, moving on. Remember, of course, that you're using statistics and numbers for evidence, especially with the economic decisions. With the military decisions, you can also find statistics and numbers, like how many troops were sent over. So look for that. And then finally, you want to make sure that with your note cards, it's not the opinion of the president, but it's an actual action, decision, or policy. In other words, it's not something like Johnson wanted to send in troops. It is Johnson sent in 100,000 troops. Wanting to do something does not mean they actually did it. Believing in something. For example, you're going to find lots of quotes about how Eisenhower believed in something called the domino theory. That's great that he believed in that, but what did he do about that belief? So you need to make sure it is a specific action or decision. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to use it. Okay, so while you're doing your research, I do want to remind you that you are going to have research for your introduction, so kind of don't forget about this little section right here. If you have questions while you are working on the paper, please feel free to ask me, of course, in class when we're working on the paper. You can always send me an email, or if there's an access day when we're working on the paper, you, of course, can sign up for that and get some extra assistance or help. Good luck!